Jacob Warner never expected his fate to hinge on a single act of kindness. There he was, hunched beside his battered old truck, trying to stay warm as an icy wind whipped across a lonely country road. He had no idea that giving his coat to a shivering stranger who appeared out of nowhere on that freezing day would change the course of his entire life and rescue the land his father had worked so hard to protect. Before we carry on, let me know where you are watching from in the comments and hit the subscribe button for something special tomorrow. Now let us return to that frigid morning, the taste of snow in the air, and the single moment of compassion that would spark a glorious turnaround for a man on the brink of losing it all. Jacob was pushing 63, his lined face and calloused hands bearing witness to decades of labor under the sun, the wind, and sometimes the unforgiving storms that ravaged his beloved land. He ran Warner Farms, a small property inherited from his parents, who had inherited it from theirs. Stubbornly clinging to tradition, Jacob did his best to maintain the family's legacy even as floods had damaged his fields, low crop prices had eaten into his savings, and the bank had started eyeing his property as collateral for mounting debts. It was a painfully familiar story in his region, where older farmers battled forces far beyond their control: erratic weather, corporate competition, and a financial system that rarely showed mercy. On many days, Jacob managed to keep his spirits intact, recalling childhood memories of simpler times when he ran through tall corn stalks, his father proudly showing him how to pick the best ears and check for pests. Those memories fueled him, reminding him that his farm was not just acres of dirt, but a heritage shaped by hope, sweat, and decades of family unity. However, as the years passed, frequent storms and the shifting climate had given him more anxious moments than peaceful ones. The last big flood had uprooted several of his orchard trees and destroyed vital irrigation lines, leaving him with a meager harvest that barely paid his bills. Then came the bank's letters, each one an ominous reminder that he was teetering on the edge. Despite everything, he woke up every dawn with the same silent vow: keep going, do not lose this land, find a way. One winter morning, eager to earn a bit of extra money, he loaded his truck with fresh eggs from his modest chicken coop, some split firewood, and a few jugs of homemade cider that he hoped to sell to passers-by on the roadside. He chose a spot near the county highway, a place where travelers sometimes stopped, though business was typically slow. The sky was cast in a gray pallor, thick with clouds that threatened another snowfall. Jacob's breath puffed in the cold air as he arranged his goods neatly, setting up a small handwritten sign: eggs, firewood, and cider for sale, farm fresh. As noon approached, the biting wind intensified, slicing through his worn jacket and chilling him to the bone. He tugged the jacket collar higher, wishing for better insulation, but he owned only one truly warm coat, a relic from the early days of his marriage. That coat was currently inside the cab, waiting for the moment when the wind became truly unbearable. Financial hardship over the last few years had forced him to give up many comforts, even new clothes. Yet each time he thought about complaining, he reminded himself that he was still standing, still a landowner, and still determined to fight for what was his. He had only sold a few items that day: a dozen eggs to a teacher driving home from her night shift at the next town over, half a stack of firewood to a young couple who said their heater had comped out, and one jug of cider to a curious traveler. It was better than nothing, but it would barely cover the cost of feed for the chickens. Jacob sighed, glancing up at the pewter sky. He wondered if he should pack up and return to the farm, checking on his animals before darkness descended. Then, in the distance, he noticed a sleek, dark-colored car crawling along the side of the road. It was expensive looking, definitely out of place on that rural highway. One of the wheels wobbled oddly, and the engine seemed to be sputtering in protest. Jacob watched with mild curiosity as the car veered, then came to a halt right beside a roadside ditch about 50 yards away. At first, no one got out. Then the driver's door opened, and a figure stepped onto the ice-packed ground. It was a woman with slender shoulders, wearing only a thin hoodie, her breath hanging in the frozen air. She walked around the car as if checking for damage, arms pulled tight against her chest for warmth. Jacob was about to turn away, assuming she would call a towing service or friend, when he noticed she was shaking. A wave of concern washed over him. That hoodie was no match for the stinging cold, and the road was deserted enough that waiting too long for help could be dangerous. Frowning, Jacob grabbed his thick coat from the truck cab. It was old, frayed at the cuffs, and patched in places, but it was warm. He trudged down the roadside, boots crunching on the icy gravel, carrying the coat draped over his arm. The closer he got to the car, the more he realized how miserably the woman was shivering. Her eyes flicked toward him anxiously, as though uncertain whether to trust a stranger. She looked to be in her late 20s, with pale cheeks reddened by the cold, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail beneath a knit cap that was more decorative than functional. "Ma'am?" Jacob called gently, stopping a few feet away to avoid startling her. "I can see you're freezing. Here, take this coat. Weather like this can get dangerously cold." She tried to wave him off politely, stammering, "I'm okay, just waiting for a friend." Her voice betrayed the uncontrollable shivers racking her frame. "I appreciate it, but please, don't worry about me." Jacob shook his head firmly. "I can't do that. You'll catch your death out here." Without another word, he stepped closer, held out the coat, and gently draped it around her shoulders. She blinked, momentarily stunned by the gesture, and pulled the coat tight. "Thank you," she whispered, blinking as though tears threatened to form. "You really don't have to." Jacob offered a faint smile. "Let me at least check your car. Maybe I can help get it started, or push it out of the snow." He observed that the front tire had sunk into a small drift. "If you can give it some gas while I push, we might free it." She nodded, still looking slightly overwhelmed. The cold air stung both their faces as they moved to the front of the car. Jacob inspected the vehicle, realizing it was a high-end luxury model, the kind he had only ever seen in commercials or on magazine covers at the local diner. "Name's Jacob, by the way," he said, bracing his gloves against the hood. "I'm Elena," she replied, pausing as if uncertain whether to add more. Her eyes darted from the coat around her shoulders to the battered pickup truck a short distance down the road. "If you really think we can push it." He gave her a reassuring nod. "Worth a try. Go ahead and hop in. Turn the wheel gently when I say so. If it doesn't work, I'll drive you to the nearest service station." Elena climbed behind the wheel, turning the key. The engine sputtered. Meanwhile, Jacob put all his weight against the front of the car. His muscles tensed, and his breath came out in harsh puffs as he heaved. The tires spun, flinging up slush. For a moment, it seemed futile. Then the car lurched forward a few inches. "Okay, slowly," he shouted. "Steer a bit to the left." She complied. The front tire inched its way out of the drift, and with a final push, the car wobbled onto more solid ground. Jacob stumbled, nearly losing his footing on the slick surface, but he managed to stay upright. Elena eased the car to a stop on flatter terrain, then hopped out, face flushed from the combination of relief and the sting of cold. "You're strong," she managed breathlessly. "I thought that drift had me stuck for sure. Thank you so much. Let me pay you for your trouble or something." She patted the pockets of the borrowed coat, perhaps looking for money. Jacob shook his head, raising a hand. "Don't worry about it. Anyone would have done the same." Inside, he hoped she wasn't offended that he refused payment. After all, he could have used the money, but it felt wrong to charge a stranger for basic help. Besides, she still trembled beneath the coat, and that was more pressing to him than a few dollars. She studied his face, uncertain. Then she noticed the thermos tucked under his arm. He had brought it along in case business was slow, and he needed a warm drink for himself. "Is that coffee?" she asked, hugging the coat for warmth. He looked down at the dented thermos. "Actually, it's cocoa. I made some this morning before leaving the farm. Warms me better than coffee sometimes, especially on a day like this." Her gaze lingered, hesitation in her eyes, but the cold seemed to push aside her reluctance. "Could I maybe have a sip?" "Of course." Jacob unscrewed the thermos lid and poured some steaming cocoa into the cup attached to the top. He handed it over, the fragrant steam curling upward. She took it in both hands, sipping carefully. The tension in her posture softened with each swallow, as though relief spread through her limbs. Jacob felt an odd sense of protectiveness. He saw she was far younger than he was, maybe younger than his own children would have been had he and his late wife been able to start a family. He felt a quiet paternal urge to ensure this stranger was truly safe. She finished the cocoa and thanked him softly. He motioned for her to keep the coat. "That thin hoodie won't protect you," he said, crossing his arms to ward off the chill that pricked his own skin. He had only a threadbare sweater on now, but she clearly needed the coat more. Elena shook her head. "I can't. You'll freeze." Jacob mustered a gentle grin. "I've spent more winters out here than I can count. I'll manage. My truck's heater works well enough, and once I finish selling eggs and firewood, I'll head home. I have an old blanket if it gets too bad." She glanced at his pickup, noticing the sign advertising eggs and firewood, along with the crates stacked in the truck bed. The entire setup spoke of a humble existence, far removed from whatever circumstances had placed Elena behind the wheel of a luxury car. She opened her mouth as if to say more, then closed it, perhaps realizing the futility of arguing with a man so resolute in his willingness to help. Eventually, she cleared her throat. "Thank you. I promise to return this to you, or at least repay you somehow." She pulled the coat tighter around her. Gratitude mingled with discomfort on her features. "You're very kind." Jacob shrugged, wishing she wouldn't make a fuss. "All I ask is that you drive safe. Road's slippery, especially heading north. And maybe you can pass on the kindness someday." He rubbed his arms, feeling the chilly breeze in earnest now that he had surrendered his coat. She nodded, seemingly at a loss for words. Her cheeks were still flushed, either from the cold or from an emotion she couldn't name. When she spoke again, her voice was subdued, almost reverent. "I will. Please, let me give you something at least. Let me buy some of your eggs? Firewood?" Jacob offered a polite smile. "If you want to buy something, I won't say no, but if you're just doing it out of guilt, keep your money." For a moment, she appeared torn. Then she stepped closer, scanning the crates in his truck. "I'll take a dozen eggs and a stack of firewood if that's okay," she said, fishing into her pocket for a wallet or phone. Then she seemed to remember something, embarrassment crossing her face. I left my purse in the trunk, but I can." Jacob waved a dismissive hand. "It's all right. You can pay next time, or not at all. I'm just glad you're safe." The truth was, he felt awkward about money these days. He needed it, but not enough to turn a gesture of help into a transaction. There was a small sense of pride in keeping that boundary, even if it cost him his sale. She exhaled, bowing her head gratefully. "Okay. Thank you, Jacob." Then, as if recollecting the strangeness of the entire situation, she offered a fleeting smile. "Thanks for everything." He nodded and stepped back, giving her space to return to the car. She climbed in, the engine still sputtering slightly, but at least it was running. Carefully, she maneuvered back onto the road, rolling down the window momentarily. She mouthed, "Thank you," one last time, the borrowed coat still draped around her, before driving away into the snowy distance. Jacob stood there, hugging his arms against the biting wind that rushed in the car's wake. He watched until the vehicle became a dark speck on the horizon, then vanished. Finally, he turned and trudged back to his truck, half expecting to find that the cold had snatched away all feeling in his fingertips. He told himself he would pack up soon, maybe attempt to sell for another hour, but no more. The day's business had been slow, and the chill gnawed at his bones. Yet his heart felt oddly lighter. It always did when he managed to help someone, though he rarely had the means to do so anymore. That night, back on the farm, the temperature plummeted further. Jacob sat beside his old wood-burning stove, feeding it with the leftover logs he hadn't sold. He pulled a blanket around his shoulders, feeling the ache in his joints from the day's exertion. A wave of exhaustion overcame him, but along with it came a subtle warmth. The image of that young woman, Elena, hugging his coat and drinking from his thermos. He hoped she had made it wherever she was going. The luxury car had looked impressive, but ill-suited for the rural roads in a blizzard. The memory stayed with him, reflecting a faint sense of wonder. He rarely encountered travelers who were so underdressed for the harsh winter. Where was she from? Why had she been alone on such a desolate stretch of highway? Questions floated in his mind, but he had no way of answering them. One day, maybe he would. Or maybe not. Life often led to fleeting encounters that never repeated. Over the next few days, Jacob returned to his routine. Rising before dawn to tend the chickens, gather eggs, check on the goat he had rescued from a neighbor who moved away, and ensure the handful of cows he kept were fed and watered despite the icy conditions. The farmland had once been robust, but repeated floods over the last 5 years had carved deep gullies into certain fields, left others with poor drainage, and rotted the old irrigation lines his father installed decades ago. He had tried patching them repeatedly, but each fix was temporary, each repair another item on a list of costs he could scarcely afford. He spent hours filling out loan applications, hoping to find a sympathetic ear at the local bank. Each one came back with a "We regret to inform you" letter. They saw him as a risk. He had no profitable harvest to show for the last season, and the floods meant his farmland was considered high risk by insurers. Jacob was stuck in a cycle. Lacking funds to fix the farm, he produced less, and thus had even fewer funds to invest in improvements. The frustration and despair sometimes threatened to overwhelm him, especially at night when the house was too quiet and the windows rattled with the wind. Yet every morning, he forced himself to push on, to feed the animals, to keep the place from falling apart, because the land was all he had left of his parents' legacy. A week after he helped Elena, on a crisp day with the sky so clear that each swirl of snow looked like tiny diamonds, Jacob was out in his barn, repairing a broken latch on the chicken coop. He wore an old sweatshirt beneath another flimsy jacket, longing for the coat he had lent out. He told himself it had been worth it, that at least one person stayed warm because of him. He wondered what had become of Elena. Likely, she had replaced the coat already, or maybe thrown it away because it was so worn. The thought made him chuckle wryly. People who drove cars like that one could undoubtedly afford better outerwear than his tattered hand-me-down. He was knee-deep in hay, rummaging for a missing piece of wire, when he heard the distinctive rumble of a vehicle pulling up near the farmhouse. Usually, only the mail carrier or the occasional delivery driver came by unannounced, so he assumed it might be the bank's courier or a neighbor in need of help. Wiping his hands on his jeans, he stepped outside, squinting in the bright mid-morning light. He froze at the sight. A large black SUV, shining like polished onyx, was rolling to a stop in front of his farmhouse. It had tinted windows and crisp tires that seemed brand new, unlike anything typical in that sleepy area. The engine idled with a sophisticated hum. Jacob frowned, a spike of nervous adrenaline jabbing at him. He didn't recall ordering anything, or expecting company. The tinted passenger window slid down smoothly, revealing a driver in a neat uniform, who opened the door. Out stepped a figure in a chic winter coat and designer boots, striding confidently toward him. She had long hair tied neatly, a radiant face framed by a stylish hat, and no sign of the shivering, disheveled person he had met a week ago. Yet there was something unmistakable in her features, something that made his heart skip. Then she smiled, and recognition blossomed in his mind. It was Elena. The expensive coat and polished demeanor were such a stark contrast to how she'd looked that frosty day by the roadside. He felt an odd combination of relief and confusion. "Jacob," she called, gloved hands outstretched, as if greeting an old friend. "I hope you remember me. I borrowed your coat." He stared, stunned. For a moment he feared she had come to complain, or to announce some bizarre consequence of that roadside encounter. But her smile was disarming, her tone warm. She still wore the old coat, his coat, draped over her arm, as though it was a treasured possession. Except now, she herself was dressed in luxurious winter gear that probably cost more than his entire month's revenue. "Elena?" he managed, stepping forward with a taut expression. "Well, this is a surprise. You look different." She grinned, glancing at the coat in her arms. "I feel different than I did that day, freezing in a ditch. Thought I'd come by to return this." She paused, lifting it slightly. "But that's not the only reason." Jacob noticed two other figures stepping out of the SUV behind her. A man in a crisp suit and a woman carrying a slim briefcase. They had a professional air, as if they were business associates or lawyers. Anxiety spiked within him. "IA, is something wrong?" he asked haltingly, taking off his work gloves. "You need help with your car again?" Elena shook her head, then signaled for the two associates to wait by the vehicle. "Nothing is wrong. Actually, everything is quite right. I just needed to see you in person, to properly express my gratitude." Jacob exhaled slowly. "You don't owe me anything. I was happy to help a stranger in trouble." Her gaze swept over the farm, taking in the dilapidated barn, the half-flooded fields in the distance. He could almost see her analyzing every detail. She frowned slightly at the tarp covering a gaping hole in the barn roof. Then, with a directness that bordered on startling, she said, "You might have noticed my car was somewhat high-end. That's because I'm the CEO of a sustainability tech company called Ward Innovations." She paused, letting the name hang in the cold air. "I was traveling incognito to see how local communities deal with harsh winters and climate issues. I wanted to gather real stories, not polished PR fluff. That day, the roads were worse than I expected, and, well, you saw what happened." Jacob blinked, caught off guard. He'd heard of that company, vaguely, from bits of news about sustainable energy solutions. He just never imagined the woman behind the brand would be in his driveway, speaking to him as though they shared some personal bond. "CEO, Sal, you're important," he said, then grimaced at his own awkwardness. She let out a soft laugh. "I don't know about important, but I do have resources that can help people. And last week, you helped me, gave me your coat, refused my money. You were the only person who stopped. You have no idea how rare that is, especially when no cameras are watching." Jacob shrugged, a bit flustered. "Just did what my father taught me. If somebody's freezing, you share your warmth. Didn't know you were who you are. Wouldn't have changed anything if I had." She studied him, her smile laced with admiration. "I believe that. Which is why I'm here." She gestured for the two associates to approach. "Over the past few days, I've done some research on your farm. I learned about the floods, how your irrigation system is practically destroyed, your orchard partially wiped out, your stable farmland reduced. I also saw the loan rejections. I'm sorry to snoop in your affairs, but given your generosity, I felt compelled to see if there's a solution. Ward Innovations invests in sustainable agriculture. We partner with farmers to install solar-powered irrigation, advanced water recycling systems, and greenhouses, then integrate them into our supply chain for organic produce. We don't usually do this for single-family farms, but your situation touched me, so I'm offering you a contract." Jacob's mind reeled. It was too much to process at once. Her identity, the mention of solar-powered irrigation, a contract that could presumably solve his crippling financial woes. "A contract?" he echoed faintly. She nodded. The male associate stepped forward, opening the briefcase, revealing neat stacks of documents. Elena took the top file, scanning it quickly, then looked back at Jacob. "If you agree, Ward Innovations will install a fully solar-powered irrigation system on your property, repair or replace any flood-damaged lines, and, if needed, we can set up a greenhouse for year-round crops. In exchange, we want to feature your produce under our brand's organic supply chain. You'll be guaranteed a minimum price for whatever you grow, giving you stability. Beyond that, you keep ownership of the land. And all improvements remain in your name should we ever part ways. We also have resources to help you refinance your loans." Her words rushed over him like a surging tide, stirring a wave of hope. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. That can't be real," he murmured, heart pounding. "You're offering to upgrade my farm, keep me as the owner, and buy my crops, all because I gave you my coat?" She offered a gentle laugh. "It's not just about the coat. It's about your selflessness. You didn't know me, yet you gave me warmth, made me cocoa, and refused payment. My company's mission is to help communities adapt to climate change sustainably. Usually we do large-scale projects, but we're testing smaller, localized partnerships. You'd be the pilot, if you're willing." Jacob's hands trembled, partly from the cold, partly from the sheer enormity of the offer. He glanced at the briefcase, then back at Elena. I don't know what to say. I can't sign something without reading it. I also need time to think. But if this is true, it's a godsend. Elena nodded. I wouldn't expect you to sign on the spot. Take your time. Our attorneys will answer any questions. We'll come back in a few days, or whenever you're ready. She gently placed the coat, his coat, into his arms. This belongs to you. It kept me warm on a day I needed it most. Let me do the same for you, in a way. Let me help you preserve this farm. Jacob clutched the coat, trying to stay composed. He felt tears prickling the corners of his eyes, though he was not one for public displays of emotion. The idea that after all these years of struggling, an opportunity might appear like a gift from heaven was staggering. Thank you, he said, voice cracking. I don't know how to repay you. She shook her head gently. You already have. Sometimes one act of generosity changes everything. This might be the start of something wonderful for both of us. She glanced around the property again. Our system includes solar panels, so your electric bill would drop. We could incorporate a water recycling mechanism to reduce flood damage in the future. There's so much we can do, especially if your land is well suited for organic produce. The contract ensures you'll be part of our supply chain. We get consistent, high-quality produce. You get financial security, and your farm continues to belong to you. It's a win-win scenario. Jacob breathed out shakily, turning the coat over in his hands. Memories of his father teaching him to plant corn, of his mother carrying pies to the county fair, of the day he married his late wife in the orchard, all flooded back. This land was more than a business. It was his heritage, his pride, and the place he had hoped to pass on if life had turned out differently. The notion of losing it had kept him up nights. Now, this chance of redemption stood before him in the form of a polished, determined CEO he had once seen shivering in a ditch. Finally, he managed a nod. Yes, let's talk details. I need to read everything carefully, maybe get a friend to help me make sense of it. But if it means saving the farm and staying afloat, I'm open to it. Elena smiled warmly, motioning to her associates. The man with the briefcase stepped forward, introduced himself as Carter, and handed Jacob a folder containing a summary of the proposed agreement. The woman introduced herself as Mallory, an agricultural specialist who would oversee the farm's transition if Jacob accepted. They explained that they could walk the property together, assess areas needing the most immediate attention, and then schedule engineers to come out and do a more thorough survey. Jacob listened intently, still struggling to believe it was all real. Once they finished, Elena promised to return soon, giving him time to think and consult whomever he wished. In a swirl of crisp winter air, the SUV departed, leaving Jacob in the silent yard, folder clutched in one hand, his old coat in the other. The wind whipped around him, but he hardly felt the cold. Could fate be so kind? He cast his gaze toward the barn, where the broken roof and waterlogged beams once filled him with dread. Now he envisioned solar panels glinting in the sunlight, new irrigation lines feeding healthy crops, a future he had stopped imagining because it hurt too much to hope. He considered calling his neighbor, Dave, or maybe Carl, a retired school teacher who sometimes helped with legal papers. But first, he went inside, made himself a hot drink, and sat at the kitchen table to read. The folder contained a short overview of the contract: guaranteed purchase of produce at a fair rate, free installation of solar irrigation, a greenhouse if needed, training in sustainable farming methods, and assistance with bank negotiations. All he had to do was commit to producing crops organically and exclusively sell that portion of produce toward innovations for the length of the contract. The document also outlined a fair compensation structure, enabling him to recoup the cost of seeds and labor, while ensuring Ward Innovations made a reasonable profit. Jacob read every paragraph, half expecting to find some hidden clause that would strip him of his land, but the wording was surprisingly transparent. The contract even stated that all improvements would remain his property if the partnership ended amicably. He felt an odd lump in his throat as he realized how thoroughly Elena had planned to help him, with no obvious catch. If anything, the agreement leaned heavily in his favor. That evening, he visited Carl, who read the contract aloud in his living room, adjusting his reading glasses every few minutes. Carl whistled softly when he reached the sections on free installation of equipment. "Jacob, this is nearly too good to be true," he murmured. "But I don't see any red flags here. Elena Ward is a known name in the sustainable tech world. Maybe she really wants to use your farm as a model project. The risk is, you have to rely on her company's infrastructure. But is that really a risk compared to losing everything?" Jacob nodded, rubbing his forehead. "I'd be foolish not to try. If it fails, I'm in no worse position than now. But if it succeeds—" He paused, letting his hopes fill in the blank. "I can't keep living the way I have, scraping by, waiting for the next flood or rejection letter." Carl smiled. "Sounds like fate lent you a hand. If you need a second opinion, we can ask Mark, the local lawyer, to look it over. But as it stands, I think it's legitimate, and you've always been a man of your word. If you sign, you'll honor the contract and do your best to produce good crops. Ward Innovations might appreciate that reliability." So it was settled in Jacob's mind. The next day, he phoned the company contact number in the folder, setting up a time to sign the final contract. Elena herself answered, sounding pleased to hear from him. She arranged for Carter and Mallory to return, along with an official notary. True to her word, she came back to the farm a few days later. The group toured his fields despite the cold. Mallory took photos, scribbled notes about drainage issues, tested the soil with a handheld device that Jacob had never seen before. She explained how solar panels could power electric pumps to draw water from a deeper well, thereby reducing flood risk from the shallower, overflow-prone creek that Jacob had been relying on. They even discussed which crops might do best under greenhouse conditions to maximize year-round production. By the time they reconvened in Jacob's kitchen, he felt more certain than ever. With quiet resolve, he signed the contract in front of the notary, and Elena countersigned with a flourish. A sense of profound relief washed over him, but also a tingle of anticipation. If he could adapt to these new methods, maybe the land would thrive again, and the farm would become profitable. Not just for him, but for future generations. If he ever had nieces or nephews to inherit it, or perhaps if he passed it down to a local family that shared his love for the soil. They celebrated with a simple toast. Jacob poured apple cider from his last jug, and Elena gave a gracious smile as she clinked her paper cup to his, humor blending with the gravity of the moment. "To the future of Warner Farms," she said softly, "and to the kindness that got us here." Within a week, things advanced quickly. Ward Innovations sent a team of engineers who arrived with trucks of specialized equipment. They began drilling test wells, studying the topography to figure out the best spots for placing solar panels. Meanwhile, a separate group evaluated the barn, planning how to fix the roof and possibly convert part of the structure into a storage space for produce. Jacob walked among the workers, feeling slightly out of place, but also excited by the hustle. He overheard technical conversations about photovoltaics, battery storage, and water filtration. Some terms were unfamiliar, but the end result was the same, giving his farm new life. Elena stayed in frequent contact, sometimes in person, sometimes via phone or video calls. Her schedule was hectic, involving trips to major cities for business deals, but she carved out time to check on the farm's progress. Jacob learned that she was not just wealthy, but widely respected as a pioneer in sustainable technology. Articles praising her philanthropic efforts popped up whenever he searched her name online, though he had never been one for the internet. One afternoon, while reviewing blueprint plans with Mallory, he noticed Elena strolling near the orchard. He joined her, breath steaming in the cold air. She seemed lost in thought, gazing at the barren trees that had once given fruit. Someday soon, these trees could produce again, she mused, tapping a slender branch. If we prune them correctly and manage irrigation, maybe next year's harvest will surprise you. Jacob nodded, recalling how the orchard had been a centerpiece of his father's livelihood. They used to bloom so beautifully in spring. My father always said the orchard was the heart of Warner Farms. My mother would bake pies from the apples. I'd help pick them after school. Elena studied his expression. I love that. Real stories, real people. This is why I do what I do. Technology should serve communities, not replace them. She paused, looking down at the battered patch of farmland. Can I ask something personal? Why did you give me your coat that day? You didn't know me at all. Jacob exhaled slowly, his breath hanging in the frosty air. I guess it's how I was raised. You see someone freezing, you help them. That's what my parents taught me. They believe that if you look out for your neighbors will look out for you, even if you're strangers at first. She smiled softly. I wish more people thought that way. On the surface, it might look like you're the one who needed help, given your farm's struggles, but you still gave whatever you had. That's a rare kind of generosity. Jacob shrugged, modestly deflecting. I'm sure many folks would have done the same. I was just there. Right place, right time, I suppose. They walked in companionable silence, the crunch of snow underfoot weaving a gentle rhythm. Jacob felt an unexpected ease in Elena's company, despite her high-powered status. She acted genuinely interested in the land, in the challenges he faced, in the stories behind each battered fence post. Her empathy disarmed him, making him forget the intimidating difference in their backgrounds. Over the next few weeks, solar panels rose on sturdy frames along the southern edge of Jacob's property, angled to catch the winter sun. Trenches were dug for new irrigation lines, which connected to a modern pump house that Ward Innovations built near the deepest well. The barn roof was repaired, reinforced to support potential expansions. Mallory trained Jacob on operating the new systems, explaining how sensors would detect moisture levels in the soil and adjust water flow automatically. He marveled at how technology could do in minutes what used to take in hours. This automated approach meant he could devote more time to other tasks, like expanding his chicken coop or maybe replanting a small orchard. Elena provided specialized seeds for winter-hardy vegetables that could be grown in a greenhouse once it was constructed. She even arranged for a horticulturist to consult on orchard revival strategies. Word spread through the local community that big changes were happening at Warner Farms. A few neighbors, once dismissive or pitying, grew curious. Some asked if they could see the solar panels. Others wanted to know if Ward Innovations might help them too. Jacob didn't have all the answers but promised to put them in touch with Elena's team. In truth, he was still adapting to his new status as a pilot farm, a showcase for sustainable methods. The attention felt strange, yet he appreciated that, for once, it was positive. Then came the moment of truth. The newly installed irrigation system was ready to be tested. On a crisp afternoon with a pale sun overhead, a few Ward Innovations technicians guided Jacob through the steps of powering the system up. He stood before a small control panel, pressing buttons that regulated water pressure, flow rates, and solar battery usage. The hum of the pumps revving to life sent a thrill of anticipation through him. Soon, water was coursing through underground pipes, emerging at the designated areas, soaking the soil in neat, controlled patterns. No leaks, no chaotic flooding. The sensors indicated optimal levels. Jacob stared, hardly believing how efficient and clean it all was. Gone were the days of hauling hoses or dealing with battered lines. He nearly choked up, thinking how proud his father would be to see the farm harnessing the power of the sun to water the fields. A group of local reporters caught wind of the project, asking for permission to do a small feature on the solar farm of the future. Jacob hesitantly agreed, as did Elena. On the day of the interview, a journalist with a camera crew stood near the newly placed panels, talking about the significance of renewable energy in agriculture. Jacob answered their questions as best he could, still feeling awkward in front of a lens. Elena stepped in gracefully, explaining her company's mission, complimenting Jacob's dedication, and describing how farmland like his was essential for food security in an era of climate upheaval. The segment aired on the local news that evening, painting Warner Farms as a beacon of hope. Jacob's phone rang more than it had in months, with neighbors calling to congratulate him, some even inquiring about part-time work. He realized that not only was his farm benefiting, but the entire community felt a surge of optimism. If it worked for Warner Farms, maybe other struggling properties could follow suit. As winter gradually gave way to early spring, the orchard area showed signs of renewal. Mallory had pruned the old apple trees meticulously, coaxing them back to life. New saplings were planted in the spaces where floods had destroyed the older growth. Jacob liked to wander among them in the cool mornings, checking buds, feeling the sunshine on his face. For the first time in years, he sensed that the farm might actually turn a profit. Ward Innovations guaranteed to purchase produce once his greenhouse was operational and the orchard started yielding fruit. Meanwhile, eggs from his chickens could be marketed under a sustainable label, appealing to consumers who wanted ethically produced goods. The synergy felt almost too perfect. One breezy afternoon, Elena pulled up in a smaller car, a sleek electric model bearing the Ward Innovations logo. She stepped out, a radiant smile brightening her face as she approached Jacob, who was busy mending a fence near the orchard. "I have an update," she announced cheerily, holding a folder of documents. "We've secured distribution channels for your farm's future produce. Come harvest time, your organic apples, pears, or whatever you decide to grow will appear in local stores under the Ward Innovations brand. Complete with labeling that tells your story. Customers love traceability, knowing exactly which farm their food comes from." Jacob's heart lifted. "That's amazing," he said, setting down his hammer. "I never imagined my apples could end up in stores with my name on them. I've spent so long just trying to keep this place from collapsing." She nodded, glancing at the orchard. "You've done more than just keep it from collapsing. You laid the groundwork for renewal. With the new irrigation system and greenhouse, we can start test growing certain crops almost immediately. My horticulturist suggests strawberries, spinach, and lettuce for a start, since they grow quickly and sell well. Eventually, we can expand to Malinois, other varieties." He exhaled, almost giddy. "I'll need to hire more help." She grinned. "We can provide some training programs for local workers too. It's all part of the plan, to revitalize communities by ensuring they have the resources they need to stay afloat." They walked the perimeter, discussing new fence lines, the location for the greenhouse, and the feasibility of hosting a local open house once everything was operational. Jacob mentioned that the barn might be converted into a small farm store where visitors could buy fresh produce, eggs, and maybe homemade jams. Elena encouraged him, offering marketing ideas. The synergy was palpable. She occasionally paused to ask him personal questions: what his childhood was like on the farm, how his parents had managed floods before the climate changed so drastically. He answered honestly, touched by her genuine interest. After a couple of hours, they found themselves near the old orchard's far corner, where a weathered bench sat overlooking a gentle slope. Jacob's father had built it to watch sunsets in the summer. Now, it provided a quiet respite from the hustle. Elena gestured toward it, and they both sat, letting the breeze rustle the budding branches overhead. She turned to face him, expression serious, yet kind. "Jacob, I want you to know that I'm not just doing this because of some marketing stunt. Your kindness reminded me why I started Ward Innovations in the first place, to protect people and the planet, not just chase profits. I travel a lot and see how disconnected we can be from each other's struggles. That day you found me, I was frustrated and worried about so many things, but you, a stranger, gave me warmth and comfort. It stuck with me." Jacob swallowed a lump in his throat. "I appreciate hearing that. I'm grateful to you for giving me a chance. Without you, I might have lost the farm, or spent my last years drowning in debt. Instead, I get to see it flourish again." She smiled, the soft radiance in her eyes. "It's your farm. I'm just providing tools. You're the one who'll make it great. You and your spirit of generosity." He felt his cheeks warm, though the wind was still chilly. "Well, you saved me in a bigger sense than I saved you that day." They lapsed into a comfortable silence, both gazing at the orchard's budding potential. In that quiet moment, Jacob reflected on how life had turned around so swiftly. The transformation was almost miraculous, from near ruin to the promise of a thriving future. And it all began with the simple act of handing over a coat on a winter road. In the following weeks, the greenhouse construction began. Crews poured a foundation and erected a sturdy frame wrapped in transparent panels that trapped sunlight while insulating against the cold. Jacob marveled at the structure's design. It allowed enough ventilation to prevent overheating, but sealed out the biting chill that still lingered in early spring nights. He helped the workers whenever possible, wanting to learn so that he could maintain the greenhouse himself. Once the greenhouse stood complete, Mallory arranged for a shipment of seeds and starter plants: strawberries, lettuce, spinach, radishes, even some herbs. Jacob felt like a child on Christmas morning, carefully planting each row under Mallory's guidance, adjusting watering schedules, and monitoring temperature. The solar irrigation system integrated seamlessly with the greenhouse, delivering water at precise intervals. An app on a small tablet let him track everything in real time, from soil moisture to humidity. He chuckled at the novelty of using such technology, but it fascinated him. The days of guesswork and hope were replaced by data-driven precision. If the system indicated dryness, an alert popped up, prompting him to water more. If it sensed oversaturation, it paused irrigation. Meanwhile, the orchard's budding leaves hinted at a robust flowering season. Neighbors began to notice the buzz of activity around Warner Farms. Some teased Jacob about joining the modern age, but others expressed genuine curiosity, eager to see if solar-powered irrigation and greenhouse cultivation truly made a difference. He invited a handful of them to peek inside the greenhouse, and they gasped at how warm it was compared to the chilly spring outside. Rows of greenery thrived under LED grow lights powered by the solar panels. In quiet moments, Jacob allowed himself a fleeting sense of pride. He was no longer the poor old farmer on the verge of foreclosure. He was at the forefront of sustainable farming in the region. At the same time, the financial pressure from the bank eased considerably. Ward Innovations arranged for a refinancing package with a partner institution that specialized in green projects. The bank's representative came by to inspect the improvements, nodding in approval at the advanced setups. The revised mortgage terms were significantly more favorable, freeing up funds for day-to-day farm operations. Jacob almost pinched himself as he signed the new deal, grateful that the threats of foreclosure had become a thing of the past. The next step was production. If he could meet or exceed the yield goals, the farm's profitability would be guaranteed. Elena maintained a presence in Jacob's life, though her busy schedule kept her traveling frequently. They spoke by phone or video chat, discussing progress. She never once made him feel like a subordinate. If anything, she insisted that all decisions remain collaborative. She often asked, "What do you think, Jacob? Or does this align with your vision for the farm?" He appreciated that sense of respect. She might have been a billionaire with a global company, but on the farm, she acted like a partner who believed in his abilities. One late afternoon, as the sky blushed orange, Jacob wrapped up his daily greenhouse routine and stepped outside. He spotted Elena's electric car approaching. She emerged, wearing more casual attire this time. Sturdy boots, jeans, and a warm jacket. Only the subtle elegance of her accessories hinted at her affluence. Waving a greeting, she headed over, carrying a small bag. "I brought you a little something," she said, reaching inside the bag. She pulled out a sleek, brand-new coat, lined with high-tech insulation. "I know you have your old coat, but I wanted you to have this. Consider it a thank-you gift." Jacob hesitated. "That's thoughtful, but it must have cost a fortune." "My old coat works fine." She laughed softly. "Your old coat is full of holes. Trust me, you deserve something better." She held it out, gently draping it over his arm. "Try it on." He slipped it on, blinking at how light yet warm it felt. The collar fit snugly, the sleeves perfectly tailored. She must have guessed his size from wearing his coat previously. He flexed his arms, marveling at the freedom of movement. Wow, it's amazing. Thank you." He caught her gaze, feeling a rush of gratitude that went beyond the garment. "You've done so much already." Her expression was earnest. "Every time I think about that day, how you didn't hesitate to give me your only warm coat, I feel humbled. This is the least I can do." Jacob touched the new coat's pocket, reminiscing about the day she had sipped cocoa from his thermos. "You said it's the least you can do, but it feels like more than enough. My farm is back on its feet, and now I have a coat that makes me feel like $1,000,000. You're too kind." She shook her head with a soft smile, then turned to admire the greenhouse shimmering under the sunset's rays. The solar panels near the barn caught the golden light, reflecting it back in a warm glow. Fields that were once waterlogged and desolate now had the promise of new life. The orchard, while not fully recovered, showed robust buds that yearned for springtime warmth. It was a transformation Jacob still struggled to believe. They spent a few minutes strolling the property, discussing the timeline for the greenhouse harvest. Elena suggested they hold a small farm event in late spring to showcase the orchard's blossoms and the greenhouse produce. Jacob found himself excited by the prospect. He was never one for big gatherings, but the idea of celebrating the farm's rebirth appealed to him. Perhaps neighbors, local officials, and even potential customers would come, forging stronger ties in the community. At one point, while they observed the orchard's silhouettes against the dimming sky, Jacob asked quietly, "Elena, I hope I'm not crossing a line, but how did you end up that day on the road alone, without your staff or your fancy coat? You said you were traveling incognito, but you must have known it'd be dangerous in a storm." She pressed her lips together, reflecting. "I was frustrated with how corporate tours always show me sanitized versions of rural life. I wanted to see real challenges, talk to real people, so I borrowed a basic car from one of our test fleets, wore my cousin's old clothes, and hit the road without telling my PR team. Then the snow came faster than I expected, and the car's battery started acting up. I got stuck. Realized too late I had no heavy coat or boots. Honestly, it was a bit reckless, but if it had gone smoothly, I might never have met you." Jacob nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes life gives us detours that lead to something better than any plan could. I'm glad you're safe. Honestly, I just thought you were some young traveler who hadn't checked the weather forecast." She chuckled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "You were generous to think that. And you didn't judge me. That day, I learned that the simplest gestures of kindness can mean the world to someone." He smiled softly, warmth radiating from the new coat. "My father once said, 'Always be kinder than necessary. You never know the battles people are fighting.' I guess that was true for both of us." Elena agreed quietly, and they walked back toward the greenhouse in silence, united by an unspoken appreciation for the twist of fate that had brought them together. As the night deepened, she drove away, leaving Jacob to reflect on the strange yet beautiful connection that had formed between them. It was not romantic. She was far younger, and they lived in entirely different worlds. But it was a bond of respect, gratitude, and shared purpose that transcended ordinary business dealings. They were allies in a quest to transform one small farm into a beacon of progress. By late spring, green shoots flourished in the greenhouse. Lettuce heads glistened with morning dew, spinach leaves spread wide in robust clusters, and row upon row of strawberry plants showcased white blossoms that promised sweet fruit. Jacob worked diligently, adjusting water flow, mixing organic fertilizers, and ensuring no pests found their way into the greenhouse. The orchard, too, erupted in a sea of pinkish-white blossoms. The sweet fragrance of apple flowers filled the air, reminiscent of the orchard's golden days under his father's care. Each bloom signified hope, a promise that the harvest would be strong if the weather remained cooperative. Elena and her team arrived to finalize the first shipments from the greenhouse. Trucks with the Ward Innovations logo pulled into the yard, their drivers smiling as they prepared to load crates of fresh produce. Jacob felt a flutter in his stomach. He had never shipped produce on such a scale. Usually, he sold a few baskets at the local farmer's market or from a small roadside stand. Now, men in uniforms carefully stacked boxes labeled "Sustainably, grown by Warner Farms, in partnership with Ward Innovations." Jacob hovered, anxious about bruising the delicate greens, but the drivers were professional and gentle. When the trucks pulled away, he realized he had just taken the first major step toward delivering on his contract. It was exhilarating, though a hint of worry remained that the produce might not meet expectations. But Elena assured him the quality was top-notch. A week later, he received a call from Elena, her tone upbeat. "Jacob, your lettuce and spinach sold out in record time. Our distributors say consumers love the idea of produce from a solar-powered greenhouse. They've placed a larger order for next week. Can you handle it?" He blinked, a rush of excitement coursing through him. "I believe so. The greenhouse is doing well. I'll harvest a new batch in a few days." "Fantastic. Congratulations on your first successful shipment," Elena said warmly. "Keep it up, and we'll expand to more retail locations soon." Jacob hung up, grinning like a schoolboy. The farm finally had a consistent income. The orchard's apples were still months away from harvest, But even the greenhouse alone provided enough revenue to keep the bank off his back and maintain day-to-day operations. He hired 2 local youths part-time, training them to help with watering, picking, and packing. Their energy and curiosity reminded him that farming wasn't just about the land, it was about people passing down knowledge, building a future. In early summer, Mallory helped him set up a modest farm stand near the newly repaired barn. Instead of the old hand-painted sign, they displayed a professional banner bearing the Warner Farms and Ward Innovations logos. Visitors trickled in, mostly out of curiosity at first, but soon they realized the produce was fresher than supermarket options. Word of mouth spread. Even the local diners started buying lettuce and herbs from Jacob, adding a note on their menu, locally sourced from Warner Farms. Each small victory bolstered Jacob's sense of purpose. He felt a renewed vigor in his daily work, a spring in his step that defied his age. With success came recognition. The local Chamber of Commerce invited him to speak at a small event on sustainable farming. Jacob, shy about public speaking, initially hesitated. But Elena encouraged him, reminding him that his story could inspire others. After some thought, he agreed. On the day of the event, wearing his new coat over clean work clothes, he addressed a modest crowd of community members, local officials, and neighboring farmers. He spoke plainly, without pretense, explaining how floods and debt had nearly destroyed him, and how a chance encounter on a freezing day brought a miracle partnership. He stressed the importance of compassion, community, and openness to new methods. The applause he received was genuine, reflecting the audience's appreciation for his honesty and perseverance. A few farmers approached afterward, asking how they might replicate aspects of his solar system. He handed them Ward Innovations brochures, feeling proud to be part of a positive shift in local agriculture. By midsummer, the orchard revealed its first small yield of apples. The floods of past years had nearly ruined the trees, so the harvest was modest, but the apples that did appear were sweet, crisp, and vibrant. Mallory helped set up a tasting station under the orchard's shade, inviting some of Ward's corporate staff who had come to film a promotional video. Jacob watched, astonished, as sleek cameras captured the orchard's beauty, focusing on pink-tinged apples nestled amid green leaves. In interview segments, he gave credit to Ward Innovations for providing the resources, and to his father, mother, and all the ancestors who had nurtured the orchard for generations. The synergy of old and new touched everyone present. After the promotional shoot, Elena and Jacob strolled through the orchard, sampling apples straight from the branch. Elena's face lit up at the taste of the fresh fruit, untainted by heavy pesticides or chemical fertilizers. "This is exactly why we invest in local farms," she told him, crunching an apple slice with audible delight. "You can taste the care that went into these trees." Jacob nodded, savoring his own bite. The sweetness filled his senses, flooding him with memories of orchard harvests in his youth. "I see that now. Technology and tradition don't have to clash. They can support each other." She nodded. "Exactly. We need both to tackle the challenges of a changing climate. People like you hold the wisdom of the land, while my company supplies innovation. Together, we might just find sustainable ways forward." They meandered until the orchard ended, gazing at rolling fields that were recovering from prior flood damage, thanks to improved drainage and mindful water usage. A gentle silence settled, broken only by birdsong. Elena exhaled contentedly. "I want to thank you again for everything you've done, Jacob. Not just for me, but for Ward Innovations. Our staff have learned so much from your practical experience. This is more than a corporate partnership. It's a testament to how mutual respect can yield real change." He offered a humble smile. "Couldn't have done it without you. Honestly, I'm still amazed that my coat was enough to spark all this. Sometimes I wonder if I'm dreaming." Her laughter floated on the summer breeze. "You're not dreaming. And it wasn't just the coat. It was your unwavering kindness. That day, you showed me that good people still exist. I wanted to prove that good deeds don't go unnoticed." Reflecting on her words, Jacob felt a wave of gratitude that transcended the orchard. He thought about how close he had come to giving up, selling the farm for a pittance, and relinquishing the dream his parents had built. Now, here he stood, orchard in bloom, greenhouse flourishing, finances stabilized, and the future bright. All because 2 strangers met on a lonely stretch of winter road, bound together by a tattered coat and a mug of hot cocoa. Summer progressed into a warm, plentiful season. The greenhouse delivered consistent yields of various greens, strawberries, and herbs, which Ward Innovations distributed to local and regional markets. The orchard's partial harvest, though modest, sold quickly, especially after the promotional video showcased Jacob's story. Even the local paper ran a feature, headlined, "Farmer's Kindness Returns in Full Bloom." Jacob noticed more visitors stopping by, some just to shake his hand and say they were inspired by his journey. He also received letters from distant counties, from farmers curious about replicating his solar irrigation setup. He directed them to Ward Innovations, thinking how wonderful it was that Elena's philanthropic approach was reaching beyond his little community. One mild afternoon in late summer, Jacob stood by the farmhouse, gazing at the newly installed sign that read, "Warner Farms, a Ward Innovations partner." He admired the neat paint job on the barn, the organized rows of produce in the greenhouse, the orchard with fresh orchard grass swaying beneath the aging trees. The transformation was so complete that it felt like a different place. A deep sense of fulfillment filled him, overriding the memories of those dreadful nights spent worrying about foreclosure. A sound of crunching gravel signaled a visitor. He turned to see Elena's electric car approach once again. She parked and stepped out with her usual grace, wearing a light summer jacket. "Jacob," she greeted warmly. "I wanted to stop by one more time before leaving for a series of overseas meetings. I'll be gone a while, but I had to see the farm in person again. Hope you don't mind." He smiled, his heart lifting. "You're always welcome. This place wouldn't be what it is without you." They strolled to the greenhouse, where she marveled at the thriving plants, then to the orchard, where the trees still clung to their final batch of apples for the season. Birds flitted between branches, pecking at the leftover fruit. An air of contentment hovered over them, as if the land itself breathed easy. At last, they arrived at the same old bench near the orchard's edge, where they had once shared reflections about life and generosity. The summer sun cast a warm glow over everything, creating a gentle hush. Elena sat, inviting Jacob to do the same. She took a moment, breathing in the orchard's fragrance, then turned to him. "I've been thinking about how to expand our partnership even further. What if, next year, we introduce a section for experimental crops in the greenhouse, ones that handle extreme weather well? We could test new seeds that my R&D team is developing. If they succeed, we could provide them to other struggling farms." Jacob considered it, feeling excitement bubble up. "That sounds worthwhile. I'm open to it, especially if it helps more farmers adapt to these crazy weather patterns. You let me know what you need, and we'll make it happen." She nodded, a flicker of admiration crossing her face. "Thank you. I can't believe how quickly you adapted to all this technology, and how committed you are to paying it forward." He shrugged, glancing at the orchard. "I guess once you see hope, you don't want to keep it to yourself. Might as well share it around." She placed a hand on his shoulder, a gesture of sincere friendship. "That's exactly the spirit that will help us face the future. I'm so proud of what we've built here together." They lingered, letting a soothing silence settle. Jacob felt a wave of nostalgia, remembering the farm's bleakness only a year ago. The difference was night and day, and Elena's presence symbolized that transformation. After a moment, she stood, offering him a final handshake. "I leave tomorrow for Europe, Asia, a whirlwind, but I'll be back in a few months. In the meantime, Carter and Mallory will check in on you, and you can always call me if something urgent comes up." Jacob grasped her hand firmly, grateful for the camaraderie. "Safe travels," he said softly. "And thanks again for everything. The orchard, the greenhouse, the solar panels, saving me from the brink. I can never repay you." She shook her head gently. "You already did, Jacob. The day you gave me your coat, you saved me from the cold. Now the farm is thriving, and that's payment enough. We're even." He watched as she walked back to her car, the golden sunlight catching the gentle swish of orchard leaves overhead. The black electric vehicle glided off, disappearing down the gravel path. For a long moment, Jacob stood by the orchard, that same swirl of gratitude and awe flooding his chest. Fate had a funny way of weaving lives together, testing character in the simplest moments. He recalled her words about a single gesture of kindness. He had never expected to see her again, let alone form a bond that would revolutionize his life. As the sun dipped lower, painting the farm in soft oranges and pinks, he lingered among the trees, picking a ripe apple. He held it up, inhaling its fragrant promise. No matter what the future held, whether more floods or new challenges, he knew he would face them with renewed faith. After all, the farm had a second chance. The orchard stood as a living testament to how generosity could blossom into salvation. And if any doubt remained, he only had to look at the sturdy greenhouse shining with solar power, or the orchard's tender blossoms from earlier in the season, to see the proof. She saved his entire legacy, and he saved her from the cold. Their kindness to each other had intertwined, forging hope where once there was only despair. In that shared warmth, they had found the secret to building a brighter future. One coat, one cup of cocoa, and one unconditional act of compassion at a time.